So anybody who's spent any amount of time around ABT Brim would know this fella I've got with me now. It's Shaun Clancy from BLA, and he would be best known not for the 20,000 products in their catalogue, but mainly for Humminbird and Minn Kota products, because, Shaun, you've been bleeding those products for near 20 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm 20 years with BLA last year. So it's been a long time, and I was in the retail game before that. So it's certainly been a long journey, probably since I was 15 years old, promoting and pushing Humminbird, and then later on down the track when BLA secured this distribution for Minn Kota, doing that alongside your brother, Tim Morgan.
Yeah, and look, we've been releasing a lot of historical ABT footage recently. We've found it on all the old DVDs and stuff that I found while we're in lockdown here. And what I really remember now by looking at that stuff is what a great supporter Humminbird was in the early days for ABT. In fact, the very first Bass Pro Series was the Humminbird Bass Pro Series. The first few years of the Brim Tour was the Humminbird Brim Series. So in the early days, you know, Humminbird really put the resources in to make sure that ABT was a success, mate. So it's been, thank you firstly to your company for helping us in the early days. And look, over the years, it's been a bit of a rocky ride. You've had the highs of being in AFC and winning AFC trophies, to the lows of not having seen you for years. But the good news is that BLA is back. We've got the Humminbird Bass Electric Australian Open, which looks like it might be able to get cracking in this September. And you've got some pretty awesome product to back it up with. It's that Mega 360 that you launched recently. I want to talk a little bit about firstly, let's get this out of the road, your AFC career, because you qualified for AFC by winning the 2010 Brim Grand Final, and you just got sucker punched right out of it straight away. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, it was an interesting phone call I made to you. I was in the driveway of my place, and I gave you a call, and I've been sort of tracking how the other guys were going, and you changed the rules a little bit that year where everyone was together. So the Bass and the Brim guys are all together, and it's kind of one team. So it's not relegation for the Brim guys or relegation for the Bass guys. You all had to succeed as a team. And you also threw another one that where all teams except the winning team was out. So you sort of changed so that you obviously could flow through a few more teams. And I rang you and said, am I right in saying we're out and I haven't even flown up to the Tweed to compete? And you went, yeah, it looks like it. So it was hard to find the motivation, but me and Tristan Taylor had a good time, and we actually won the Brim side of things, which was good. And but yeah, it was 1 year, and couldn't control it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's right, mate. The candle burnt bright, but not for very long. So the pink jersey AFC series it was. You were Team Tackle Junkie then, mate. I'm sure you've got a pink jersey not framed anywhere because it was the most hideous coloured jersey I think we've ever made. But we made you wear that with pride.
Yeah, it was good. Absolutely loved it. You know, back then you had to win the grand final to get in. So it was actually a really big deal. And, you know, obviously to win a grand final was a big deal and a huge, and obviously still is. And then that extra reward by getting into AFC and sort of following the path of, you know, the Scotty Towners and the Chris Wrights and Tim Morgans and Reuters and all those guys that we used to watch and be envious of back in those early years.
Yeah, mate. So thank you very much for taking that so well. You were a pretty good sport about it. After you spat chips for about 30 seconds, you were right. Otherwise, okay, just had to get it off your chest. The product that you've got nowadays that's really opening some eyes is the Mega 360 imaging. Now, Humminbird's had 360 for a while. Like, well, I remember having one when it first started. It was a reasonably clumsy sort of unit that looked like a talon on the back of your boat. And it had the unit that would go down and that little transducer and spin underneath. And it'd give you a reasonably good image of what's going on. But when you've applied that mega high frequency technology to it, it's like the old stuff's junk. This new stuff is awesome. And tell us about the feedback you've had for the product, because you've got a few guys who've got it on boats now.
Yeah, so the guys that really knew the previous 360, which was running 455 kilohertz, so a lot's come in the space of side imaging and down imaging, where we've evolved up into 800 kilohertz and then up into megahertz, which is around 1200 kilohertz. And frequency gives you better clarity. And then it's a trick of getting that high frequency to actually make sense. So there's a lot of background work that the guys at Humminbird do to create the images that we create. So unfortunately, even though the 455 kilohertz 360 was really good, and the guys that knew how to use it, knew what to look for, found it a deadly weapon. And you see that from the Palaniks and the Jochimsons over in the States, continue to use that 455 to success. And certainly Barra guys and things like that over here would use it to success, but maybe the brim guys and guys chasing smaller fish found it a little more difficult to get that definite fish return, but you could still use it for structure and bottom composition and stuff like that. So coming through and bring it into megahertz range just cleans up all that image, so that we see very similar quality of image than what we're seeing with our mega side imaging, but obviously rotating right around the boat. We've got Barra guys using it. We've also got, and they're getting unbelievable returns, as we could appreciate. Chris Hickson's got one, so he's been using it on the brim, and he's posted some really nice shots showing individual brim clusters and schools and things coming through. He's been using a bit on the Murray Cod too, down at Lake Mulwala, the Cod Nationals, and got some amazing results there too. So yeah, it's definitely got a nice reputation in its early time over here in Australia.
Yeah, we all remember when Chris Hickson turned up to the Gippsland round of the Costa Brim Series. He came straight from the Hobie Kayak Australian Championships that he won. He strapped this thing onto his boat the night before. He came in, I think, in second place in that event, saying, "Oh, I was just going across a flat and the 360 was saying the brim were over there. He was throwing and catching them." I go, that's the last thing that prick needs, is to know exactly where the fish are on a flat. It's like he's deadly everywhere else, and it's just made him more invincible. But luckily, he died in a ditch over that pat, and the fish left. And even though the 360 can show you where the brim are, it can't show you, it can't tell you where they moved to. So luckily,
that's right.
Luckily, but you know, the images he was getting from there, and we're going to have some on the cutaway here, just, you know, of the flat, of the brim, that round donut looking image. Once you know how to interpret it, it's just ridiculous the amount of clarity, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the greatest benefit is that rotating 360 image. It'll show you obviously snags, rocks, weed beds, and all those sorts of structure-based things. It's also going to show you fish and where the fish are exactly. So rather than, I suppose previously, we get out on a sand flat and we start randomly casting around the boat. And realistically, we're probably casting maybe 5 to 10% productively in the direction of a fish. With 360, you can turn that into full productivity. If the fish are in the area that you've set your 360, you'll be able to see them and you'll be able to cast exactly to them. So we sort of look at it as a clock face, so you can really say, okay, there's fish at 3 o'clock and they're 20 meters away, and cast straight to them. So I suppose your casting efficiency and productivity goes through the roof.
Yeah, and we have seen that. We've seen Carl using his 360 when he won the event at Lake 10 Killer last year. He wasn't using the Mega 360 though. He was using the old 455, wasn't he? So, you know, that new, clearer, updated image is going to help anyone that fishes tournament, be it brim, bass, and barra. Now, the event that you guys are sponsoring this year, the Humminbird Bass Australian Open at Lake Wyalong, it's going to be perfect for this product. And you haven't been to the lake, but there's the fishery consists of a lot of open water standing timber. Like you'll have big paddocks of nothing, and then there'll just be 4 or 5 or a cluster of trees in there. And you go up to the trees and guys throw plastics or spinnerbaits or weedless, lipless crankbaits through this structure. You're going to be able to rock up to that sort of structure, just zap it with the 360 and know if there's even fish in there. It's nearly unfair, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think probably if guys use it even better than maybe going to timber they can see that's breaking the surface, would be to find areas of timber that are underwater and can't be seen from the surface. And what that'll do is give anglers maybe some ground and some structure that doesn't get hit as hard. So being able to do that, and even if there's a few isolated trees that are underwater, you'll be able to know exactly where that tree is. So as you approach, basically you can see, okay, there's a tree that's 20 meters away at 11 o'clock, and you can start casting in that tree without having to get anywhere near it. You'll also be able to see fish holding on that tree and on the branches as well. So that's probably where I would use it, is to try and find some structure that's under the water that people can't see, that breaking the surface.
Yeah, no, and look, it's funny how things go the full cycle, because I remember an old bass megabucks at Lake Glenbourne, Timmy and Carl. It was just after the side imaging stuff came out. They were driving around the main basin, finding all of those secret trees, and then using spot lock, because spot lock had just come out to spot lock in the wind above these secret trees. And everyone's going, what the hell are they doing? They're fishing very specific structure, which is 20 foot down on a windy day that no one else can see. And it dead set gives you a solid advantage. And like usual, Carl probably walked away with $4,000 or $5,000 in his pocket after that event, thanks to his Humminbird gear. And we've been used to seeing that all over the years. Mate, the last thing I want to talk about is when we did the product launch for the 360, it was over at Tangalooma. It was just before all of the COVID stuff kicked in. But one of the useful things that I like doing is I like testing out manufacturers' claims. So you're telling me, oh, okay, it's going to give you this great view of the bottom. Of course, what I do is I don't just believe you. We put on the snorkel and goggles, got underneath, we put the drones up, and in that really clear water at the wrecks, and there are some cutaways of this happening now, you can see what everything looked like underwater from the air, and then you could compare that with the mega imaging. And even though the 360, it's a little bit distorted, it's not 100% undistorted, it's pretty friggin' accurate what we do. But the interesting thing is when you go under the water, you can see that 360 picks up the structure that you can't actually see from above. So there were a few ribs of an old boat sitting there. And from the drone, you could hardly see them. From the boat, you could hardly see them. But once you get underwater, it was actually quite significant structure that unit picked up. So what I learned from that day is, the 360 in combination with your eyes and what you can see, it's absolutely a deadly combination.
Yeah, and I think that was a good example where we could cross-reference and jump in the water, put the drone up, because we did have that clear water. But being sonar doesn't rely on any water clarity. So it's going to be, obviously, somewhere like that, you probably don't need the technology because you can see everything anyway. But in a system where it's darker water, dirtier water, it's going to show you the same amount of clarity that it did on that day, because it's sonar and it's not using any sort of light to emit that return.
Yeah, no, it's good. Look, in dirty waters like the Brisbane River or the Fitzroy River or some of the cod rivers, it's going to be absolutely magic technology. You know what I'm like, though? I just need to test it so that I've done that grounding myself, so that I'm believing 100% what's on the screen. So, mate, really looking forward to the Bass Electric Australian Open. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get a loan unit to try for that as well. So we're going to be running those units in the event, and I'll try to bring you some live coverage of it all happening, mate, and hopefully, if you Victorians have been good boys that are allowed out of your state, you'll be able to come up to that event too and experience the wonderful bass fishing, which is Lake Wyre, mate. Again, thanks for the input. Thanks for BLA being a great sponsor of ABT, and thanks for joining us on ABT Lockdown Live.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure, and I've obviously been part of the ABT scene for a long time, and it's great to be supporting you guys. And I hope to get up and be part of that Bass Electric and chase some bass, which I very rarely do.
Awesome, mate. We'll catch you then.
Thanks, Steve.